everyone, and welcome to The Perfect Place to Start. This is a series dedicated to embracing resilience and fostering genuine conversations. I'm your host, Meg Gluth. In each episode, I have the privilege of speaking with remarkable guests who have navigated some of life's most challenging experiences and come out the other side by taking the next step forward. In this series, we dive into topics often left unspoken: mental health, the true meaning of success, navigating relationships, and the full spectrum of life's highs and lows. Our mission is to break the silence around these issues, offering a platform for open and honest dialogue that can inspire and empower us all. The inspiration behind this series comes from my own journey. My experiences have taught me that the darkest moments often hold the greatest potential for growth. Join us as we uncover the powerful stories of resilience, celebrate victories, and learn how to navigate life's challenges together. This is the perfect place to start, and every conversation is a step forward.
Hey y'all, this is Meg. Welcome back to The Perfect Place to Start. As you know, we talk with people, ordinary people that I've met in my life, about places they've been in their life that have offered an interesting starting point. I'm here today with my friend Terry. I'm going to let her introduce herself. And I asked Terry to talk with me today because she has some really cool and very interesting starting places in her life. So we're going to go there today. For those of you who don't know, we don't plan these ahead. We don't script them. We don't prep them. And so these conversations are raw and unfiltered. And I'm really, really excited to do exactly that kind of conversation with Terry. So with that, Terry, introduce yourself however you would like to do that.
My name is Terry Aubry. I am a farm girl from the Midwest who's a mom and a mentor, chemist and a businesswoman, and grew up a better man than most.
Solid. Why do you describe yourself as a better man than most?
My dad was a girl dad.
Tell me about that.
Growing up in a rural environment, it's very survival by skill, survival by adaptation. The currency growing up rural is not money. It's not time. It's character.
Yeah.
It's honor. There isn't cash that's exchanged, but your word is who you are defined as. Not just, when you leave this house, you represent the family, but people didn't leave. So if you did one bad act, it followed you forever. But if you did a good act, it also followed you forever.
How big was the town you grew up in?
I grew up in a dead-end dirt road. So the town that I went to high school in was 18,000, which is pretty big. It's a county seat. But my grade school class was 10 kids. Yeah. Kindergarten through 8th grade. And it's communal. It's family. It's you're related to everybody. You don't date anybody in the county, kind of a thing.
100%.
So you had to be a better man than most. I had a military dad who was a farmer, who was brilliant, smart, hard worker. And it wasn't about not being able to handle a problem. It was work the problem. Because with the resources you had to use your head, think long term, think short term, measure twice, cut once.
Yeah. I'm familiar with that.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. When I asked you to do this conversation, it was kind of on the heels of some times where you and I were just sort of batting around what it is to be in struggle in tight places. And part of the reason I asked you to come here is because I think the rawness and the authenticity of the way that you look at that, and that you take these concepts of the values, the character, all of that, and really apply that in a really real and tactile way. When we talk about places to start and starting places and the idea of where you are is a perfect place to start, sometimes I like to drive right at those that aren't the sexiest places to start. Like, we're not talking about the day we graduated from Yale. You know what I'm saying?
Correct.
Talk to me about one of your more memorable places to start.
Well, I think starting points are defined differently by different people.
Yeah.
I think people traditionally align a starting place with an event.
Mm.
You know, you and I have talked about being a phoenix.
Yeah.
You go through the fire, you get through the fire, you come out with a polish and a shine, not a burn, because there's going to be another fire.
Right.
I don't know that I define starting points as surviving an event or crossing a threshold.
Yeah.
Simply because it is an event. So it makes a great story for people. People are intrigued about events, but I don't think they look deeper into where something transitions.
Right.
Because things don't just have a finish and end. That's first grade to second grade.
Right.
That's the gap. I mean, there are events people would want to delve deep into because of the curiosity of humans.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's leaving an abusive household, surviving kidnapping, getting married, graduating college, getting divorced, burying a loved one, those are events. But I don't know that I would define any of those as having a starting point after it, because my starting points are awakenings.
Tell me an awakening that's memorable for you.
So I remember I've got probably 3 critical awakenings that I would associate knowing and feeling I had a transition of some kind. And because you don't leave something behind, you just pack it differently with you. So I remember I just graduated college. I've got an apartment. I've got a good job. I've got health insurance.
Yeah, right.
I got a car. I had just ticked off all the to-dos, my goals. Like I just got out of that small town, got an education, did all of these things. And one day I'm just saying, oh, there's a used bookstore. I'm going to go in that used bookstore. Across the park, there's a huge book sale. I'm walking around just doing this and I burst into tears. And I'm like, what the hell is this all about? And it occurred to me in the middle of just looking at used books, I don't have to be anywhere I don't want to be. I have the freedom of choice. Because it was like, I've gone this far, what's next? And it hadn't hit me that I needed to, that there was something next, because my goals had been set on these key things. And to me, it was the definition of to have choice is to be able to find my own safety.
Right. So where are you in your life that all of a sudden, knowing that you can do what you want with your life is an awakening?
I think it was just something inside of me was saying, you've been waiting for, it's hard as a neurodivergent because you're always measuring yourself against standards you don't understand.
Yeah.
And milestones that you're like, wow, should that have felt cooler than this? And I think in my own way, that day I was like, this is what safety feels like. I have the ability to choose anything. And I didn't grow up having safety issues over food or safety issues over housing, but flexibility, mobility, privacy, physical safety. So the ability to go, I can open up this effing book right now and read it, or I can walk away. Just the realization that I controlled those moments now. It was like breaking chains, and I'm safe.
What'd you do after that?
Anything I wanted to.
Go to the actual moment.
The actual moment, I looked around at everybody that was everybody there, just to see, is anyone else like having a moment? Is there like, does everyone else is just going through their daily routines. And I thought, wow, I wonder how many times I've crossed somebody in a grocery store or at a ball game, and it's been a moment for them. I've always been able to, I'm empathic, so I've always been able to pick up on your good day, your bad day, your emotions. But this was my this was my epiphany. And I kept looking around like, is anyone picking this up? Like, you know, you go from crying to laughing. Like, you know, I'm sure I thought everybody thinks I'm nuts. I'm sure they're like, this is this woman over here who's laughing, who's smiling now. I was so happy.
Yeah.
But the fact that I broke into tears, and I'm not, you know, I was not a crier, but I was like, I had to stop and go, what is this all about? And then I was like, I don't have any place to be. I can do whatever I want.
Bookstore spiritual awakening.
It was a bookstore spiritual awakening.
And that's number one.
That was number 2.
Okay. You want to talk about number 1?
We'll get to number 1.
You want to talk about number 3?
We'll talk about number 3. So probably about 18 months ago, because I had buried somebody, as you've gone through, leaving somebody behind, not by choice. And getting yourself through it physically, getting financially through things, taking care of everyone else's needs.
Yeah.
And probably it was about 18 months ago, I had gone and gotten a massage. And the reason I went to get a massage was I was very bunched up. Yeah. Everybody kept giving me gift cards saying, "You need a massage." And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go and I'm going to do this. And I got in there, and the moment this woman laid her hands on me, I burst into tears. Yeah. And I was like, And it had nothing to do with her relaxing me. It was the fact that someone had physically touched me because you wall off so much. Yeah. And I was like, wow, I really miss connection.
Yeah.
And it just felt, I've always tried to define or try to figure out the definitions of emotions that I don't necessarily have had experience with. Like, I've never felt shame, and I've never felt greed. But I'm always looking outward, you know, because you're trying to, imposter syndrome every day, adapt to the situation. It's not that you're giving yourself up to fit in, but you're trying to go with the flow, be the best you can for the people around you. And that day, I think I defined what the word grace meant to me. And it was allowing myself to be more authentic than I'd ever been before. Yeah. It was not just vulnerability. It wasn't just, it was like saying, it's okay to meet my needs, but I'm not going to feel guilty to meet my wants anymore. And I always felt like, you know, you feed your kids first kind of a thing. Yeah. You just do. But the selfish feeling of wanting to have something for myself just dissipated that moment. And I don't know exactly how it was, because I was kind of at this precipice of, you're either going to live or you're going to die. Like, your soul is going to live or die through this. You've gone through stuff. This is a shit thing to go through. You're either going to live or not. And so I started to define why I cried and said, you know what? I think, because grace was a word I never understood. People like, oh, give yourself grace. Or, you know, some people are very religious and spiritual and all those things. And so I didn't connect with other people's definition of grace. But it's funny because Theo Vaughn had said something in some podcast he'd done a long time ago where he said, what everyone forgets is that no matter how old you are, you're still a kid just growing up. And I was like, that's a really, you know, that's so true. And you and I have talked about the fact that, you know, I've made my best friend is that little kid inside of me. And picking up, and I've always taken good care of her. We're all given this infant at birth, and we don't realize we have to take care of this child. But I've always held her hand. I've always protected her. I've always done those things and acknowledged her along the way. But I can also be my adult self. I don't always have to be protecting myself. Yeah. And in that moment, I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to be the most authentic I've ever been. Today, I am the best version of myself I've ever been.
I like that. Hang on to that, because that's a place to arrive. And I think a lot of people try their whole lives to get there and are always aiming for that feeling. But I don't think that one just wakes up and arrives there.
No.
Tell us what happened before that. How did you get to that place?
How did I get to that place? Oh,
what happened? What was the event? I mean, and I'm going to push you a little
yeah.
bit.
No. I have to think about like the steps to get there.
And you said you buried someone.
I did bury someone. Yes, I did.
Tell me about that.
So he died unexpectedly.
Who's he?
He is my late betrothed. His name was Norman, and he was a great human being. And we had a blended family, and we'd both battled demons from the past and found this beautiful kind of middle ground that gave both of our kids a really great environment of a healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It was during COVID, so we had so much time together. And whether it was divine intervention, some would say, or just happenstance, he happened to work in an industry that shut down the day it shut down. Like he worked in
so COVID hits your home.
Yeah, so
together.
he's laid off March 13th.
Okay.
And so we're like, okay, we got 2 kids. They got to work from school from home. I'm working from home. We're going to do this. So we had so much quality together time.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a caretaker, and he was a chef for us all, and he was the coach in the backyard. He was all of those things. And it was a great experience for the 2 boys to see a really good, healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of years into it, we're just sitting down for dinner one day. I've got 1 kid off at a birthday party, 1 kid off at another event.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a stroke in my arms and passes. So he's, his heartbeat stayed till we got to the hospital, and I got the boys rushed there because I wanted them to be able to say goodbye while he was still warm, very bluntly. And within a matter of hours, we were doing the, donor sign up and all of that kind of stuff. And you go through the business of keeping everybody together, and the business of, he was Burmese, so there were customs and traditions. And, I'd never in my lifetime thought I'd be planning a funeral in Chinatown and getting the Buddhist monks to come in and all of these things. And so you're in a numb state.
Yeah.
For a very long time.
Yeah.
And then you're in a state of getting out of the numb and trying to respond to make sure, again, all the kids are healthy. Mm-hmm. Everyone else's needs are being met. I know I'm putting myself on the back burner, but we got to do this. We got to do this. We got to do this.
Yeah.
The reckoning is going to come.
Do you know the reckoning is going to come while you're doing it?
Oh, yeah. I've always known reckonings come.
Did you feel that? Did you feel like you were pushing that off?
I knew that I was, because the moment he passed, I'm an explorer. I've never been a person that's afraid to try something new because of judgments, because I don't know when people are judging me usually. So I'm not afraid to be the first ones to walk through a door or walk through the woods. Right. I want to know what's on the inside. I want to know how it works. I want to know all of those things. And so life to me was always the forest, if you will.
Yeah.
I could see trees, I could see day, and even, it was a refuge, but it was also a great place to explore. Mm-hmm. And the day he died, it was just darkness. It was like seeing a forest at night. You couldn't see anything. It was just silence.
He died at the hospital.
He died at the hospital.
And so
technically, yes.
So when does the darkness start?
The darkness starts the moment I leave the hospital.
Because did you have some hope when you were on the way to the hospital?
No. I knew while he was doing it. And I think one of the hardest parts of the whole thing is being so self-aware and so medically aware, because I do have a medical background.
Yeah. That
I knew when he was going through what he was going through, that he was having a stroke.
So he's having a stroke.
He is going, something's wrong. I'm sitting him down while I'm literally in the back of my head going, you need to grab the phone, you need to call 911, but you need to keep him. I've been with people that when they passed.
Yeah.
And I feel the obligation to make sure that you are comfortable when you pass. Yeah. So the tone of my voice I'm controlling, what I'm saying to 911 is very, he's now beginning to do this, respiration.
Mhm.
We now had bilateral seizures.
Mhm.
I'm being very calm because I don't know if he can hear me.
Mhm.
And I know his last words, what they were, and that he knew he was going.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to scare him.
Yeah.
So I'm going through 5,000 motions to make sure all the way to the end of the end that I'm comforting him.
But there's not a lot of you in that.
But it's not about me. This is his
Yeah.
transition.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how
Yeah.
and it's not a coping or an avoidance mechanism. It's just when the speaker we had was talking about your legacy kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It's how you're being watched and monitored when transitions occur.
Mm-hmm.
I've been like that my whole life.
Right.
And some people say, then you give too much of yourself in those moments.
Yeah.
But there's a recoup in this. I know I did the absolute best.
Yeah. And that gives you
it gives me peace.
Yeah. I get that.
I don't feel badly that, because others like, oh my gosh, you didn't. And I'm like sitting there and saying, don't go. I'm right here. Don't leave me. That, some people, that's okay. And that's what they want to do.
Yeah.
I don't have regrets at all about what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very private thing, but it was his transition.
Yeah, I get that. So the darkness.
So the darkness
when you're at the hospital.
Is at the hospital when we've passed the test, we're brain dead.
Yeah.
So now it's on to, donation time the next day, which is a whole other trauma thing.
Yeah.
So
what's the darkness like for you?
It's like walking in a yard in the dark towards woods, and the woods just keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
Just keep moving. They just keep moving. And it was like that for months.
Yeah.
It was just, it's like your mind is probably protecting you from, and you're just giving you some space to go, giving yourself a little bit of time for uncertainty. It doesn't feel like that in the moment, though.
Yeah. No, yeah.
It definitely feels like I'm just going to, is there just a cliff? Am I going to keep walking in this dark and I'm falling off a cliff?
Mm-hmm.
But, I think at a certain point, because it was dark for a long time.
Yeah.
And then it was like, well, somebody who had gone through a loss had said to me, you have a choice now. We always have choices. And everybody says it's as easy as, you just have to choose to live.
Yeah.
But it's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
So it was like, you can choose how you live.
Were you still in darkness then when you're laying on the massage table?
I was pretty much in darkness. I could, there was some light, but there was no direction. Then it was all around you, and you're like, which way do I walk at this point? So the moment that I realized that, you know what? I miss being touched. I miss someone touching me. I had avoided electric connection, even with a friend. Don't hug me, I'll break, kind of thing for so long.
Yeah.
That I was like, touch. Okay. That's what I need. I need touch. So I started hugging people.
You have an awakening on power. Essentially, you have an awakening on connection.
Mm-hmm.
What's the third awakening of your life?
Ooh. So the third one I would call awakening to strength.
Tell me about it.
So I grew up very remotely, very introverted. People who know me now would never understand what I was like as a child.
Yeah.
While I had my opinions, I said whatever came out of my mouth sometimes, because that's what autistic people do. Yeah. We also had a father who had severe PTSD.
Okay.
So what you said did matter.
Yeah.
Filtration was very important. And you didn't know when he was in a flashback or not in a flashback. Mm-hmm. He was fully functioning.
Yeah.
So physical security was always a concern, because he might throw you through a window to save you.
Right.
From something you didn't see that wasn't there. Or he could just lose his temper or have a bad day and not remember any of it. So I'm 17.
Yeah.
And I've got younger siblings that I consider like my babies.
Yeah.
Been taking care of them, protection mode since I was however old. And then protecting yourself.
Yeah.
And this wasn't a house where friends came over. I had one friend that had ever been over to my house.
Yeah.
And this friend who'd been over to my house had a household that also had secrets.
Yeah.
So we were safe spaces.
Yeah.
We understood each other's rules.
Yeah.
And I was that oldest daughter, overachiever, mothered everybody, tried to keep the peace, knew how to play to set the stage for the calmest outcomes.
Yeah.
Hedge the bets.
Yeah.
And worked a lot of jobs,
Mm-hmm.
had all the, sports and everything else. And one day I had come home, I don't know, maybe a half hour late. But I worked at a movie theater as one of my things. And so sometimes you worked a little bit late. So I'd come home late and Dad was in a state. I hadn't been home to see what had spun him into a state, but he could wake up just from the pressure of the door opening in the house. So, and it could have just been something imaginary in his head. And he'd come out and I wasn't a yeller. Yelling wasn't allowed by anybody but him.
Yeah.
And I love my dad. Don't get me wrong. I love my dad. He's raising his voice. He's doing whatever. And I said, and for some reason, again, it was an epiphany. I didn't even try to raise I didn't try to compete with the level.
Yeah.
I think it was something in my head was like making you louder doesn't make you right kind of a thing. And I said, and it was the brave moment that I said, you know what, if we can't have this conversation in regular voices, I'm not going to have the conversation.
You're 17 years old and you said that?
Oh yeah. And I thought I could die. This could be what puts me in the ground. But, and he grabs me by my arms and throws me in the chair and says, we're having this conversation. I stood up and I said it again in the same voice, throw me back down the chair. Okay. I'm not going to feed the monster. I don't feed the monster anymore. I'm not going to rise to the occasion. I'm not. If you have something to say, it's not an argument if only one participant's in it.
Yeah.
Well, I go to school the next day and there are fingerprints. You got clutch marks on you. And it was the first day in my life that no one said anything about it. Like the few people that would have normally been like, sorry you had a rough night. No one said anything. And I thought, oh my gosh, this has become normal. And I was like, never raising my voice again. Never. There was something about taking ownership of my strength by being silent, by choosing differently. It looked like faster exit strategies.
Tell me what you mean by that.
It was always my goal to achieve so much that I could get out, create a safe space for myself, create an oasis, a haven if I needed someone else to retreat to, and not by something. And my dad was not a monster. He wasn't. I don't want to paint it in that light, but there were things beyond my control and people's control on what was going on. And this was a long time before people understood PTSD.
Right.
So it was coming up with faster, better ways. Like I couldn't have achieved enough. Get the free ride, get the whatever, work 20 more jobs, put more money in the bank. But it also meant that I was going to have to come up with strategies for things that I was not equipped at the time. And a lot of that was interacting with other human beings.
How'd you do that? Because you mentioned autism, and that's something that can be a really hard hurdle for finding your way into interacting with other people. So what were I was never good with other kids. The kids I grew up, the family that I went to school with was one thing. But I could never engage with other kids my age, partly just because I didn't understand play well. Yeah.
I also was always cautious because I didn't want to make friends because I couldn't bring friends home. I was around adults a lot. I was around guys a lot. I was around farmers a lot. But at the same time, having a family that's a pillar of the community and, nobody's going to believe.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to help. Nobody knew how to help. And even if they suspected, these were different times.
I know. Yeah.
So it was trying to find someone who I thought could teach me how to talk to people.
Yeah.
So I started to look at, and unfortunately, I worked with family in various jobs. So I needed to find a stranger that I could confide in and talk to.
Yeah.
And it ended up being a coach.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even a coach for sport that I had. It was just someone who I was like, who kind of always looked at me in passing. Like we had he's like, I see you kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Because you don't feel felt. You don't feel seen.
Yep.
And certainly don't feel heard. And you're not trying to quake.
Yeah.
You're trying to keep the calm water.
Yeah.
So I'd had a conversation with him. Senior year, I decided I was going to sign my sister and I up to be the water girls for the boys track team. Because what a good way to get out of class senior year, and what a good way to be at a track meet with 500 guys.
Yep.
So we happened to be driving home. And of course, they didn't want us riding on the bus with the sweaty boys.
Sure.
So, and we got good meals and the boys got $2 at the McDonald's to spend.
Yeah.
So my sister and I were in two different cars, and I happened to be in the car with this one coach and his wife.
Yeah.
And there was something about him where he looked up in the rearview mirror and saw me in the back, and he said, "So how are you today?" And it was the way he said, "How are you today?" And I said, "Well, I'm struggling." And he's like, and it wasn't a judgment statement that came out of his mouth. And he's just like, struggles happen. But I think you know how to get through struggles. And I said, well, I'm dealing with something new. And I don't know how to fix the situation. And he said, well, what are you struggling with? He's like, because it's not grades. And it's not achieving. And I said, I don't know how to talk to people. And he said, well, you're talking to me. And I said, but how do you talk to somebody you don't know at all? And I said, I don't know how to make adult friends. How does that even work? Because I'm looking forward to going away to college. I'm looking forward to being insignificant in a great crowd of strangers.
Yeah, for sure.
Like my dream as a kid was, I'm going to go move to this city, be in a tower, because there's so much anonymity in a crowd.
Yep.
And I think people think you escape crowds to go to small places to feel alone. Everyone sees you in small spaces. You can feel insignificant next to a mountain.
Yeah.
And I said, I need to figure out how, because I'm not looking to make friends, but I need to find people that know how to do things I don't know how to do. And he said, well, you talk. You ask them their stories. And I said, how do you do that? Because small talk's not a cool thing. Like that's not like I overshare. I will overshare, or I made the mistake often, and I still do, where someone says, hey, my dog died. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. That happened to me. And you feel, and they're like, why do you have to make it about you? Why are you hijacking? And I'm like, I thought we were, I was trying to say, I understand. So how do you do that without? And that was one of the stories I had said to him. I said, I've at the time I was dating somebody casually who, unbeknownst to me, loved horses.
Yeah.
Always want horses. Well, my dad that week, for whatever reason, had brought home on a trailer, no lie, the Brookfield Zoo petting horse. Shows up at our farm to retire. Don't ask me how that happened.
Okay.
So this individual who clearly I'm dating is excited to say, hey, I think we're getting a horse. So it's his moment.
Yeah.
His dream coming true. And the moment he's like, hey, I think we're getting a horse. And I'm like, hey, my dad's bringing home. And the look of how do you hijack? And he says, why do you always hijack everyone else's life? And I was like, ooh, I don't do this friend thing real well.
Yeah.
So I told the coach, I said, hey, this just happened. I'm not sure why, like, what am I doing wrong? I know that I I know I keep things at a distance, but when I try to approach the barrier, the fishbowl, I feel like I'm clicking my forehead on the glass. And he said, "You're not asking for help wrong. You're asking the wrong people." And it's hard to explain to someone who doesn't know that the fishbowl isn't solid. In front of you, it might be, but there's always a doorway into something, even if you have to kick one in. And I was like, okay, so how do I kick in a door without, drawing much attention? And he's like, "What are you worried about attention for?" He's like, "Don't ever dim your light because it makes someone else squint." And I remember that. And I was like, okay, I get that. And he's like, "Your path is going to be lit by your own light. But it's not just you. Sometimes we gravitate towards people and their lights, their energy, their whatever it is. And maybe, and you have friends," and he was the first one to explain to me, friends can come and go out of your life.
Yeah.
And that's okay. No one had ever said that. And I was like, oh, I thought you got to find one and keep it. I didn't know how fishing worked, And I was like, okay, all right, that's cool. And he's like, I've had friends that did this. And then I've had friends where you're just like, we kind of outgrew each other. The concept of outgrowing someone was, So I said, well, how do I get to a point where, how do you know your friends? And he said, "I hate to say it to you, but you'll know when you know. Who turns up for you? But in order for someone to turn up for you, you have to let them know who you are."
Which is its own thing.
Which
and
is
probably like a lifelong.
Which is its own thing.
So as you're having these 3 points of awakening in life, you obviously, no one knows in the moment, the significance of any moment on their future. But you're sitting here today and you have this opportunity to have this conversation. And we have these conversations here, not for us, but for the fact that not everybody gets something out of this, but maybe one person does.
Absolutely.
We're both on the planet to hit that one person in this moment. That's the dharma between the two of us here.
Correct.
If you take your 3 points here of awakening, however you want to phrase that, I don't want to put words into your mouth. And you could sort of speak to someone like you, who's either waiting for those or on the cusp.
Right.
As we wrap, what's your advice? What's the wisdom? What's your offering?
Wisdom's a funny word. I don't know. Wisdom is kind of
That's
like
why I gave you 3. You could give
advice. Oh, I know. Never close doors. You're going to walk through them again and again. Don't be afraid of walking through a new door. And if you don't see a door, keep walking around the building until you find one. And if you don't find one, kick one in. You don't know what's on the other side. You really don't. I think we develop boundaries in our heads that are put there based on measures that you think exist, whether you're someone like me who is trying to adapt to concepts and emotions that we don't understand fully. Or we've put up blockades. We delay things. We take the long way sometimes, and sometimes that's necessary. But don't close doors. And that little girl, just hold her hand. Everyone says it's all about being present, but you forget about being present for yourself. And I think of that once, and don't feel bad about it. I'm at a point now where I am my best self. I don't feel embarrassed to say I'm proud of who I've become. Pride was something you were I associated with a bad thing as a kid. Be proud. Be original. You're not broke. You're not lost. You're you.
I'm happy for you. I'm happy when I hear you say that.
Thank you.
Thank you for making time to talk to me today.
No problem.
This has been awesome.
Love the conversation.
Love you.
I love you too.